All right, to select the channel, first press this button, and you'll see that when you select the different channels, this LED turns to the color of the channel. So if I want to modify channel 3, they go orange, modify channel 4, and I can turn them on and off just by pressing these buttons. And I'm only using channel 1 right now, so I'm going to turn it off. Maybe you have to hold it. All right, let's look at some of the basic operations on this Rohde Schwarz scope. So I have a sine wave here, and the frequency is 5 megahertz. If I want to show some statistics related to that frequency, I'm selecting frequency. My source is channel 1, and I turn that on. Down at the bottom here, it tells me that the current frequency is such a value, minimum, maximum, and so on. So I can turn that on and off. If I want to turn the measurement on and off, I do that, and it just shows me the main ones up on that screen. And I can actually move this up and down. I think if I select on the left, and I can add more measurements down at the bottom if I want to. All right, so now let's see if I want to change the scale, the vertical scale. You would use these two buttons here, and notice these buttons are in green. It's matching the scale that you're currently working with. For example, channel 1, if I were to select channel 2, it goes green. Okay, and if I want to go back to channel 1, it goes yellow. And then let's say I wanted to measure, or sorry, not measure, but to control the vertical. I would adjust that knob, and I'm now getting 2 volts per division, 5 volts per division, 10 volts per division. And if I want to move where the ground is located, I use this adjustment, and it moves it up a certain amount, and it tells you how many divisions it's changing it by. And I can go by 1 division, and there we go, or I can put it back so ground is right at the center. And I think the slower you go, the more resolution you get in the changes. Okay, there we go. And now if I want to change the frequency, it's done on this top scale, or the horizontal, so I can just move this back and forth. If I'm changing the frequency for my generator, this is what I would change. And I'll leave it at 5 megahertz right now. And if you want to change the position in which it triggers, you can see that changing over here. Okay, so those are some of the very basic things. Maybe let's change it to a square wave and make some measurements. Here I've turned on the generator, and you can see I've set the frequency to 50 kilohertz pulse, 500 millivolts peak to peak, and 250 millivolts. I'm just using a straight through connector between channel 1 and the auxiliary out. And you can see that it's measuring 50 kilohertz down here. If I want to see some statistics, I can go to quick measure, and it's showing me all the statistics for the waveform that I'm at 50 kilohertz. And down here it actually shows me my generator. I didn't even realize that, so that can be very useful. These are all my horizontal measurements, and so for example, if I wanted to measure duty cycle, I would press this button, and down here it's telling me the duty cycle, and I can turn, I guess, statistics on and off here, and it's saying a positive duty cycle. Right now it's 25%, the minimum, the maximum, the mean, and so on. And I can set that for various types of measurements. On my FFT, I can set variables such as the starting point. So click on start, and type in, and it gives you the range that the minimum can be from 0 to 98.2 kilohertz. So I've just type in 0 and hit enter. That gives me my minimum. My stop, I'm going to make the stop 100 kilohertz, so 100 in kilohertz, and that gives me my range. So my span, my stop is 100 kilohertz, my span is from the minimum to maximum, and my center frequency is 50 kilohertz, and you can see that right there. And I'm getting that signal from my generator. So let's just see if I click on my generator here and change the frequency to some other value. And when you see this little blue thing turned on, you can use this dial over here. So I'm going to change the frequency to 40 kilohertz. I've got to make a big change here. I think the slower you go, the smaller the change you will get on the frequency. I'm going to adjust it till I get exactly 40 kilohertz. I went over a bit there, too much. Okay, and I think if I can turn this on and off, the output on and off from the generator by pressing that button. You see the light goes off there as well. I turn it back on, that light comes on. And if I want to add some cursors so that I can find that exact frequency, I turn the cursors on. And you can see I've got 1 and 2 here. I think as you press the button, so I think if you press the button, you're adjusting cursor number 1 right now. So I'm going to put the cursor where it's measuring that frequency. And you'll see right there. So it does tell you somewheres. Yes, I had another screen overlapping it. So this marker right here is marker number 1. And it says FFT number 1 here. It's made some changes here. I can just close that off, sorry. So here F1 is at 40 kilohertz, and that's what we set the generator to. The level is 17.5 dBm. We've got a second cursor there, and if you want to adjust the second cursor, you just click on this button one time. It gets you to the second cursor, and then you can move it left or right, however you wish. All right, here I'm setting up a second channel. We're looking at I2C signals. We're not going to decode initially, but I want to adjust the vertical scale. So if I want to check the vertical scale for channel 1, notice the light is green here right now. I don't know if it'll pick it up in the camera, but here it turns yellow. So I'm looking at channel 1, and I have channel 1 set to 2 volts per division, and I can adjust the position of the ground, and you can see up here it's telling me that position, and I want it to be at on a division at 0. There we go. Okay, it's not triggered or anything right now. And you can see that channel 1 is 2 volts per division, but we have channel 2 at 50 volts per division. So that's what we have to change that. So if I press channel 2, notice that these buttons go green, indicating that you're adjusting channel 2. So we want to change that 50 volts per division. And everything in the bottom here is for the vertical. So I'm going to change that to match up what we have over there. And I need to be changing channel 2, and I am, and I'm on the scale, so we're at 20. I'm going the wrong way. Right there, 2 volts per division. And now you can see that second signal, which is in green, but we have to adjust it so it doesn't overlap. So I'm going to bring it down here. Okay, and we can see, let's get it to go maybe 3 divisions underneath. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to change the time base, and I know that the clock signal is down at the bottom, and the data is at the top. But to change the time base, and you can see the time base scale is at 50 milliseconds per division. I guess you can change it in this menu. That's new. Okay, and so there's our signals, and it already seems to be putting decoding on. Oh, yes, because I have the protocol turned on over here. So I'm actually seeing the decoding happening, but I don't really need to see the digital signals at the same time. Here are the protocol adjustments, and the decode is turned on and it's set for I2C. And you can see how it has serial peripheral interface with no chip select and with chip select, which is very handy because this scope does have more than 2 channels. So, but we want I2C. Oops. Don't know what I hit there, but let's just go back, turn protocol on, and decoding is turned on. I guess I can turn that on and off there. And as I said, anytime you have this in blue, then the dial over here allows you to select one of these. So I want I2C. And display setup, I haven't tried that before, but I guess it's in hexadecimal. And you can turn, I guess, the bits on or off. So the bits are what you see just above, which is kind of handy because I don't know if you can change this scaling, maybe, but it's showing me, and I'm going to adjust the trigger so it's more to the left. I don't need the trigger level so much, but the trigger position. And that's the level. The trigger position will be over here. So I just want it to start over on the left a little bit more. This part is very useful for I2C because it is adjusting the trigger level for channel 1 and 2. And you can actually press this button to automatically find those trigger levels, which are in the middle of the signal. The other thing that you can do is trigger on different patterns. So start, stop, address, and data. So you can actually select address and data, which is kind of neat here where you can select different values to trigger on. So I'm just going to go back, but we're just going to trigger on a start condition. Let's go back to trigger, and I'm not too sure how to get out of here. Trigger, I just want to trigger on start. So back, protocol, trigger, yeah, right here. Okay, so the other thing that's important here is, well, I don't want to trigger on both. All right, I found the correct menu here. It was the I2C trigger, and I selected this button, and I just want to trigger on the start condition. Okay, that's a little bit more simple to back out of here. Okay, and I'm running right now. Yeah, it is triggering, and the start condition is this point here. If I want to move it so I can maybe zoom in a little bit more, I can move that trigger position all the way to that 10% point right here, and then I can zoom in by hitting scale. I want to go the other way. Nope. I think I just have to move my trigger point because I want to see the whole thing on the screen, and that will do it. And I know you can change the brightness, so if you come over to here, and the LED brightness are these LEDs here. So if I click on that, you'll see those LEDs dim right here. I think 20 is probably the minimum. So 40 is probably a good setting. The grid is fine, but the waveform, I think we need to make the waveform a little bit brighter. So yeah, that's doing that. So that is a little bit brighter. And so I believe you can turn on and off that digital display. I'm not too sure how to set the the height of the information, but this is properly decoding because I'm running a program on an Arduino right now, and you can see the data right now is 0, 0. If I press a push button, it's causing the count to go up. And what's really neat, I haven't seen this before, especially on the picoscope, it's showing you the decoded information as well as the digital signals that you see up on top there. Okay, it's taking the information from the analog input, converting it to digital, and displaying it. It's even indicating the acknowledge and write conditions for the I2C bus. So really useful. One of the other things that you can do is zoom in. I'm just trying this, so And it says select an area to zoom. Since it's a touch screen, I should be able to select a particular area right there, and it is zooming in. So that's kind of a neat feature as well. And since this is SPI, I'm going to press a button that causes the count to go up, and you're seeing the digital values displayed here. If I press the yellow button, it should go back to 0, and I can actually go back negative values. So that's properly decoding. The first byte stays at 0 all the time. And if I click on protocol, this is where you can go to the trigger, and it tells it that it's a serial bus and so on. I guess you can select a whole bunch of different setup things here. I guess a serial pattern. I haven't used that before, but there's obviously a lot of configuration that you can do for SPI. I just clicked on the math features, so you can do subtraction, multiplication, division, square root, absolute values, all sorts of things in the math functions. And you can turn it on and off, and I suppose you can save them here. This is the generator screen, so you can see you can create sine, change the amplitude, change the offset, do sweep. The other thing I thought was pretty neat, see if I can turn it on here. If you press this button down the bottom right, you get this screen here. I guess these are different settings. So SPI with chip select, SPI without it, CAN bus, I2C, UART, and UART with receive and transmit. So each of those protocols. It doesn't have a lot, but it has most of what's most common for sure. And then oscilloscope, FFT, masking, Bode plot. That's kind of neat. I would need a circuit to test this out, but it's very useful for the telecom class when they're working with filters. I will bring in a circuit to try it out at some time. So back to this screen. It does also have a digital multimeter. That's kind of neat. It's telling you the voltage up here. I haven't tried that out yet. And a counter, I guess that's a frequency counter, but right now there's no trigger, so we don't have that. And I guess you can turn these on and off individually, which is kind of neat. Turn off the counter and turn off the Bode plot. Oh, still turned on. I guess you can turn it on and off here. Measurement display points. Lots of settings. Okay, I figured out that screen. So these are your choices. Scope, quick measure, FFT, masking, and Bode plot. So if you want Bode plot, you would select that. Back to here, it's kind of like a main menu, and the oscilloscope. Whereas the ones at the bottom, you can turn them on and off. So I can turn on the meter. I have the meter up here. I can turn on a counter, and you can see I have a counter in that area. And the probe adjusts, so turn that off. I guess you gotta come here to turn that off. And I can turn it off up here and here. So those are kind of neat features. The generator we looked at, search, I haven't tried. Measure, let's actually put in a signal now. So if you have multiple channels turned on and you want to turn them off quickly, I suppose there are many ways to do that, but I was just finding if I press 3, it will turn it off. Press it again, and if it doesn't turn it off, I just come over to here, turn it off. Same thing with channel 2. I think maybe if you hold it for a long time, it'll turn it off, but that was a quick way to do it. So let's look at some of the very basic functions, and I actually have this coming from the Keysight waveform generator. So I'm going to disconnect that output generator, and I've got the generator turned off, which would be a good thing to do when you're not taking any other signals. So let's see, if I wanted to save this screen capture, I press action, and I'm taking a picture. Okay, and here it's going to time out, but I can just hit OK. Now I'm going to actually improve the way I'm connecting things here. Just a second. I seem to be getting a lot of noise here, and this is connected from the Keysight Edu 33211A waveform generator, which is a 20 megahertz generator. So I'm going to see if I connect it to the auxiliary out generator on the scope, whether I get a better trace. So let's try that. So I'm going to turn on my generator and set it up for the same settings I had before. So the generator's turned on. I want 10 kilohertz, and as I said, once you've got this little blue indicator here, this lights up, and we can change it to 10 kilohertz. But I believe you can also type in 10 and kilohertz. Okay, so it gives me 10 kilohertz, and I want 250 millivolts peak to peak. So I type in, I guess I can type it in, 250, and so it's 250, and it's millivolts peak to peak. So I have 250 millivolts peak to peak and no offset, but I need to turn the output on, so I do that here, and my output is turned on, and my zero, I don't know if it shows you where the zero is, but if you change this, yeah, it comes up on the screen right here. So my horizontal position is at 0. I can change the horizontal scale, which I'm doing here. And I can change the scale for the vertical. Okay, and maybe we'll leave it that way, but we'll change the horizontal. And you can see that the trigger right now is not in the center. That's the trigger marker. And if I, well, actually it is in the center because, didn't notice that. It's in the center because we have a menu over here. And if you want to turn that menu off, yeah, you can just hit that menu button and it turns it off. So now I have the whole trace on the screen. Let me just change the time base again to get a few more sine waves. I believe if I want measurements, I can see them down here, and you can move this up and down to get more or less measurements. And you can also turn on statistics. Gives you a little bit more details about that particular measurement. I suppose you can add different measurements. Let's try that. So I'm actually trying this for the first time. So you can see measurement 2 is going to be not peak to peak, but let's choose another measurement. So duty cycle, which should be 50%, but yeah, there we go. So there's a second measurement down on the screen, and if this was a square wave, we could do other measurements. Yeah, getting some noise popping up every once in a while, and this is actually coming from the generator in the scope. And you can reset the statistics right here, and you can turn the statistics on and off, so that way you just get the two basic measurements down at the screen. So let's try that with a square wave. So I'm going to go back to my generator. And now the generator screen comes up here, and I'm going to change it from pulse. Okay, and pulse is set up for 10 kilohertz, amplitude of 250 millivolts peak to peak. I could add some offset, but my duty cycle is 25%. So let's, well, I'm already measuring that. So let's maybe add period in here. So measurement, and we want to go to measurement number 3. Select that, and we want, yeah, let's say we wanted the period, which is up here, and now it's measuring the period of the signal. I guess if we wanted statistics, we could turn that on, and it's giving you the statistics of all of those signals over a certain period of time. Now let's look at cursors. So if I wanted to turn a cursor on, that's turning the cursor on. I guess if I move this back and forth, so I've turned the cursors on. So I went to cursors, and it's telling me that the source is channel 1, the type is horizontal, and let's go to vertical. Okay, and now I can move my cursors left and right. So let's say I wanted to measure the time high. Well, actually I can get out of the screen just by selecting back, and my cursors are still active. So there's one of the cursors. So I'm going to mark that point. And actually that's cursor number 2. So I'm going to move cursor number 2. You can see it right there. Just going to measure the time high. There's one of my cursors. Maybe I want to change the time base, measure more accurately. So measure that cursor right there. Okay, and then cursor 1, which is right here. The highlighted cursor, the one that you're working with, turns orange. And to switch cursors, you just press this button. Now I'm at cursor number 1, and I bring that cursor. As I said, the slower you move that dial, the more precise the measurements are. So it's telling me that T1 is at the trigger point. That's why we've got 0 seconds. T2 is 25 microseconds after that trigger point. So the difference is 25 microseconds. 1 over that difference is 40 kilohertz. And here the duty cycle is 25%. And I think anytime you hit these scale knobs, it'll tell you the measurement over there, up on the top. And I was wondering before, so I'm changing this here, and now it's 10 and 20, but it also tells you up there. So the verticals are always down at the bottom here, and the horizontals are at the top. It changes because you can change what you want to do by touching some of these things. So, you know, if I wanted to switch to AC or DC, I could do that. If I want to change the probes, there we go. I couldn't find this before, but we're using a times 10 probe, and you can see that right here. So I could switch it to a times 1 or a times 10, and then go back up into here. All right, so that's actually a neat feature. I guess you can probably do the same thing up here. Click on 20 microseconds and adjust it to 10. So yeah, that's also another neat feature. And sampling time, the edge, I guess, rising edge, falling edge, either. The annotate was kind of neat. You can actually write on the screen. I can put my name here. You can do that, and I can go back to annotate, and I can clear everything. I think this does a delete of everything, and you can go back and annotate, but I found it more useful to use a keypad and say, you know, if I wanted to type things in here. And it's not one of these keypads where you have to turn something very slowly. So enter, and now I've got that information up on the top of the screen. This tells you a little bit about the acquisition mode, and this tells you about the triggers. Okay, reference point is the center, trigger levels. So we're triggering at a level of 14 millivolts. If I wanted to change that trigger level, I'm moving this dial up and down. That's telling you the trigger level. And I think if you press this menu, anything where you had a menu on the right hand side, this clears that menu to give you the maximum amount of screen. Same thing here. These things you can slide up and down. So if you wanted more statistics, you can get that on the bottom. This is for run and stop and start. You can do it on the touch screen or on the buttons. You know, everything's eventually going to go to screens and no buttons. They could have almost done that with this particular scope. So like I said, you can't see it down here, but I've got the generator output going to channel 1. And I guess what I could do is hook up a second channel from the Keysight generator. Let me do that. So here I do have 2 different channels. Channel 1, the yellow channel. And I think the other thing I just noticed is whichever channel you have selected, you'll see that it's green here. Over here it's green as well, but it's filled in. And if I select channel 1, channel 1 gets filled in and channel 2 is not filled in. The other thing I always notice is that when you touch the screen, something is going to happen. So I think there is a touch lock up here, so that I guess when you touch things on the screen, it won't do that. Might be handy for some laptops as well. So let me turn that off. And I guess I could change probably just by selecting that. That's my current channel. I can select this to be my current selected channel. That way when I move this cursor up, I'm moving that channel upwards as well. Okay, that seems to be okay. I lost the other channel because my wire came out. I don't have the probes that I need, but now I've got the bottom channel, and if I want to select that channel, I just do that. Now I'm in green. I can move this up and down. I can change the vertical scale. Okay, up and down. And let's say I wanted to make some measurements. I guess quick measure. It's probably going to ask me this time which channel I want to work with. Oops. I think I turned the generator off. Generator on. Nope. Oh, it's because I turned the channel off. There we go. So I want to turn on channel 1 and channel 2. Oh, I suppose when you do select measurements, it's doing it just to one channel. I'm not sure of that yet, but let's say it's telling me the frequency is 10 kilohertz, VP peak to peak. I go up to this channel, and it's telling me that the frequency is 10 kilohertz. So I'm not sure if you have to do a separate channel at a time. As I said, I'm just new to this. Anything else? You can do auto set, the old way of if you can't figure out your signal, you can do that. I guess these are the horizontal settings. You can press that button. So there are a whole bunch of ways to get that. Okay. So I think that's about it for the demo for today. I guess you can come back here for measurement. Not sure what history is. It's something I'll have to learn a little bit more about, but I've covered many of the features, so I think this is a great scope the way it is so far. All right, this is the Keysight oscilloscope. This is the very first time I'm using it, so all I did was connected the generator output to channel 1 input, and I used auto scale, which generally I don't like to use, but let's just auto scale that. And you can see that looks like the frequency is 82 kilohertz. So let's actually go into the waveform generator. Okay, it says waveform, sine wave, frequency. One thing I really like on the Schwarz scope is the touch screen, because here you have to come over to these little buttons, but that's been traditional. So I can change the frequency, and I suppose just like in the other scope that this dial is the one that you use to control the frequency, so you can do it there. I don't know if you can type in a frequency. It doesn't appear that way, but I'm not sure. So let's say I wanted 50 kilohertz. I've got 50 kilohertz. Let's turn on some measurements. And okay, the measurements are the period. I'm always hitting that over here. I guess the period is shown down here. You can hit that. It's got frequency and period. Let's try cursors. So I turn on the cursors. There's source 1, cursor X. Let's hit that. So there's X1. Okay, X is the time. And I guess it's this knob that's controlling that. This has a push button. Now, as to how you move the cursors around, manual mode, there we go. So let's pause for a second. Okay, I think I've figured out the cursors. So source 1, X1, and then you adjust this one over here. So I guess you can also press to select. So if I want to select X1, I would put it here. So that's telling me that value, and maybe, no, I thought it was changing at the bottom as well, but not. So let's try that again. Entry x1, we're still on x1, and now it's x2. So yeah, this is x2. Oh, here we go. So down here are the different measurements. So it looks like this is the change in x. This would be the frequency. So we have a measurement here. So we have 20 microseconds in between the two cursors, and that's 50 kilohertz. I guess we wanted to have Y cursors. We go to Y1 and then hit this button to select it. So that's the Y1 cursor, and you can see that here. Bring it to the top of the waveform, and if I wanted to select Y2, just down here, and it looks like you can link them together. That's linked. I didn't really want that, so let's go to Y2 and then hit it to select. Now they're not linked. I can measure that. Okay. You can save to USB. I don't have anything connected there to try that out. These are selecting the different channels. So I guess you can turn them on and off. Now, I guess right here it's telling me which channel I'm controlling. So you turn them on and off by selecting them. And so if I want to control just channel 1, I'm doing that with this scale here. And if I were having channel 2 selected, I don't have anything connected to it, but let's turn something on. Okay, here I have two different waveforms turned on. So if I want to control the vertical, I've got the green turned on, which is channel 2, and I can move that up and down. If I go to channel 1, this orange light comes on, and now I'm controlling this channel, and I can move the position. Okay, so make it a little bit smaller. Move the position, change the frequency, and you notice that the top trace is triggered. This is the first time I'm trying this, but there must be a trigger menu. And over here, so this is measurement, trigger is over here. So just these 3 buttons for triggering. So let's select trigger, and must be telling us which channel. So it says channel type. Not sure which channel it is yet, so okay, source is channel 1, positive edge triggered. Go to channel 2. I guess since that dial lights up, I'm going to go to channel 2, and now that you see that it did trigger on channel 2. The trigger level, I suppose, is this button, and you can see the little 2 over here, and the trigger level is shown up here. The intensity, not sure what force is. I'm looking for display intensity right here, persistence, grid. So I guess you can change the intensity with the enter button. Yeah, you can see the grid changing. And let's go back. There's a back button. Display labels. I guess you can add annotation here. I keep wanting to press the button. Not sure how you add the annotation. Oh, right here. Maybe that one. And you have to select edit. Oh, this is the kind of thing I don't like, where you have to type. I guess you have to type in, if I wanted to write my name, very slow way to annotate something. And nowadays annotation is quite important. This reminds me of the Rogers remote, if you want to find something. Really slow way to do it. Old-fashioned, kind of slow. And I guess you see the text over there from the annotation. This is a much older technology. I find this scope a lot more cheaply built as well. Even you can tell from the metals that they use for the BNC connectors, just the overall build quality. The other thing that was kind of odd is this thing weighs 2 to 3 times heavier than the Rohde Schwarz scope when it's much taller. It has a bigger screen. The resolution of both screens are about the same. I haven't tried the FFT yet. If I do that, I'm doing it very quickly, and I don't have time today, so I'm not going to do that. So just from a quick check, Maybe I'm going to add my USB memory stick here. Do a couple screen captures. So it says save to USB. Is the USB storage attached? Is the destination path set to? See, even this. The other one I just plugged it in and it worked. Here I've got it plugged in correctly. To change the settings, go to save, recall, save. Well, I don't have the time to do that, so I'm going to go back out of that. And I guess back will get me out of that. Let's just try it again. Save to USB. Nope, it's not allowing me to do that. And I'm going to turn off FFT was turned on. Okay, from a quick look, I would have to spend more time with this scope, but obviously the Tektronix was, or sorry, the Rohde Schwarz was, to me, 5 times better. Okay, I'm going to turn this one off. So this is the 5.5 digit multimeter. It can do AC volts, DC volts, 2-wire, 4-wire resistance, can measure temperature, the diode. So it's not bad. It's not bad. I guess you can select the range here. Let's go back to DC volts, millivolts DC, range. I'm not seeing where the range is showing up. Oh, sorry, down here. So that's the 10 volt range, 100 volt range, and we can subtract. Very small little minus button there, but fuse in the front, I guess, to measure current. Diode check, frequency. You can change the range up here. That's where I hope in the future they all go to touch screens, because they put the button there, you want to touch it, but it's actually a button over on the side. Probably a dial. Yeah, it doesn't have a dial. So if I go to range, yeah, I guess you can just press that button to select the different ranges. So 10 volt range, it shows me down here. I guess the acquisition time, you can make it slow or fast. Acquire. It has data logging, which is nice. And I'm not sure where you change the speed. Frequency, no, that wouldn't be for that. Run, stop. No. Shift. I guess the shift is for some of these buttons up here. Temperature and capacitance, so it can measure capacitance. That's a nice feature. I found out where to change the resolution and the input impedance. So this is the resolution button. So you can go slow, medium, fast. And I don't know if that's really resolution or the data acquisition speed, but let's go to fast. Yeah, it's just updating either more quickly or less quickly the value coming in here. So I don't really think that's resolution, but I'm not sure. And here the input impedance, I'm trying to change it. Oh, there we go. So 10 mega ohms, or it seems to go to auto. A little slow to respond. There we go. It's saying auto. I'm not too sure how do I change that. Okay, as I said, this is the very first time I'm using it. I guess I can hit, oh, that's for data logging. I wonder if there's a way to stop the display. It's auto triggering back. I thought I'd find like a stop and a start. User labels. Oh, there we go. No, that's for the data logging. I didn't think I was in data logging. All right, that's all I have time for right now. The other device is the Keysight waveform generator. I'm going to have to take a little bit more time to test that out, but it's pretty basic.